My name is Salira Mornay, I'm 29, and my parents told me to sell my inherited house to pay for my sister's new home, or else I'd no longer be their daughter. If you've ever faced something like this, comment where you're reading from. It was Tuesday, March 2, 2021, 1936, when the words hit the table like a hammer. The living room smelled faintly of lemon polish and leftover soup. My father leaned forward, palms flat on the oak coffee table, his voice sharp. "That's a free house. Stop being selfish. Either share it or you're out." My mother nodded, eyes cold. My sister sat smug, scrolling on her phone, already imagining curtains and paint colors. The house wasn't free. It was the small brick home on 18 Willow Bend Drive, 92 square meters, that my grandmother had left me in her will. The deed bore my name. The garden still smelled of her roses each June. Every room still echoed with her voice. I gripped the mug of tea in my hands, porcelain hot against my skin. My throat tightened. "It was her wish," I whispered. "She didn't mean for you to hoard it," my mother snapped. "Family is about sacrifice. Your sister needs a start." My sister smirked. "It's just sitting there. You don't even live in it." That wasn't true, I did. The kitchen light flickered, the pipes rattled in winter, but it was my shelter, my anchor, my grandmother's last gift. I stared at the mug, watching steam rise, trying to keep my voice steady. "And if I say no?" My father didn't hesitate. "Then you're not our daughter anymore." The clock on the wall ticked, loud and merciless. The silence afterward pressed heavier than their words. I didn't respond. I only sipped the tea, bitter now, the ceramic edge rough against my lip. Outside the window, snow was falling in slow, fat flakes, muffling the street below. I didn't know yet that in 24 days, when they returned with a realtor, the sight that met them inside the house would make them scream. On March 7, 2021, they came to the house. It was a Sunday, 14/12, the light dull and gray through the bare branches. I had just finished mopping the kitchen floor. The smell of pine cleaner lingered in the air. The knock was sharp. When I opened the door, my parents stood there with my sister behind them, arms crossed. She carried a glossy binder, the kind realtors used to present listings. "We need to take a look around," my father said flatly, stepping inside before I answered. I wiped my hands on a towel and followed them. My mother ran her fingers across the banister as though already inspecting value. My sister's heels clicked against the hardwood. "You don't even use the second bedroom," she said casually, peeking inside. "This could be my office." "This is my home," I said, firmer than I felt. My father turned, his jaw set. "You're clinging to bricks when your family needs you. Don't you see how selfish this is?" "Selfish?" My voice rose. "I pay the taxes. I patch the roof. I scrape snow off the walk every morning. That's not selfish, that's living." He set the binder down on the counter. Inside were printed comps. 3-bedroom houses nearby, sales closed in the last 6 months. One circled in red. $226,000. "That's what this place could fetch," my mother said, tapping the page. "Enough to cover a down payment for your sister's townhouse." I stared at the numbers. My stomach twisted. "I'm not selling," I said finally, each word slow. My sister laughed under her breath. "We'll see about that." The air felt tight, heavy with detergent and tension. I could hear the old pipes creak as if the house itself were holding its breath. They left soon after, binder tucked under my mother's arm, their silence more cutting than words. When the door shut, I pressed my palm against the cool wood and whispered to the empty hall. "They're not taking you." Resolve rooted itself deeper. Their demand didn't come out of nowhere. It was the endpoint of a long road I'd walked mostly alone. At 12, I asked for art lessons. My mother shook her head. "Too expensive." 2 weeks later, my sister started tennis classes, $60 a week plus gear. At 16, I worked weekends at a bakery, breathing sugar and yeast from 5:30 to noon, saving for college textbooks. My sister crashed my car the same year. My parents paid $1,800 for repairs without blinking. At 21, I graduated with honors. They missed the ceremony to attend her volleyball finals. "We've supported you enough," my father said when I asked. By 27, I'd accepted the pattern. I was the backup plan, she was the prize. My grandmother had seen it too. In her final months, she'd whispered to me while we sorted her photo albums. "This house will be yours. Promise me you'll keep it." Her hand had been cold but steady on mine. When she passed, the will named me the sole inheritor of 18 Willow Bend. Taxes fell to me $2,140 annually. Repairs, bills, every leak and crack. I learned to patch drywall, replace weather stripping, seal the driveway. It wasn't just walls and roof, it was proof I could stand on my own. Meanwhile, my sister drifted from apartment to apartment, rent often covered by my parents. Her credit cards piled debt, but they always rescued her. Now they were framing my house, the one place that felt like mine, as another family resource, another thing to strip. What was at stake wasn't just brick and timber. It was inheritance, dignity, a promise to my grandmother. If I let it go, it would confirm what they had always implied, that I existed only to hand over what I built or received. I sat at my kitchen table that night, the wood scarred with knife marks from years of meals. A candle burned low, wax dripping. I opened my notebook and wrote, "Stakes, home, independence, respect. Cost if lost, everything." Then beneath it, in bolder strokes, "They will not take it." The proof of their plan arrived not from whispers but from paper. On March 11, 2021, I came home from work to find a glossy envelope tucked halfway under my front door. The corner was bent, damp from melted snow. On the front, the logo of Harper & Company. Realty gleamed in green ink. Inside was a draft listing, my house. Charming 2-bedroom brick, 92 square meters, quiet neighborhood. Market estimate, $229,000. Viewing available upon request. My name wasn't on it. Instead, under owner contact was my parents' phone number. I held the page under the yellow kitchen light, my pulse hammering in my ears. The paper smelled faintly of toner. They hadn't just threatened. They had already called an agent. At the bottom in fine print was a note. Commission. 3% payable on close. Scribbled in pen beside it was a date. March 25th. 2 weeks. They had scheduled a showing. I called the number printed at the top. A man answered, upbeat. "Harper & Company. Realty, this is Kevin." "Yes, hello," I said, voice tight. "I live at 18 Willow Bend. I just received a flyer saying the property is for sale." He hesitated. Papers shuffled. "Oh, I was told it's the family home. We have confirmation from your parents." "My parents don't own it," I said, sharp now. "The deed is in my name." Silence. Then a slow exhale. "If that's true, then they can't authorize anything. But I'll need documentation." "I have it," I snapped. "Stamped, signed. I'll send it tonight." I hung up and yanked open the desk drawer. The deed sat there, crisp in its folder, my name typed clearly. I ran my thumb over the embossed county seal. Rough under the light. The towel of my grandmother's kitchen still hung on a hook by the sink, faint lavender smell lingering. I touched it, steadied myself. First evidence, undeniable, they were moving behind my back. I set the deed flat on the desk beside the realtor flyer. For the first time, I didn't just feel anger, I felt control. I make a choice. The next morning, March 12, 2021, I carried the deed and the realtor flyer downtown. The air was sharp, the sidewalk still wet from last night's snow. By 10:04, I was standing in the county records office, the smell of old paper and disinfectant thick in the air. A clerk in a beige cardigan sat behind a plexiglass screen. I slid the deed under the gap along with the flyer. "Can you confirm something for me? My parents are trying to sell this property." She adjusted her glasses, typed on her keyboard, then pulled up the file. Owner of record, Salira Mornay. Registered December 2, 2019. No liens, no secondary owners. "And can anyone else authorize a sale?" "No," she said firmly. "Not unless you grant power of attorney. Which you haven't." She tapped the flyer. "This is invalid without your signature." The weight in my chest eased, but then tightened again when she added, "Still, if they've scheduled a showing, buyers may believe it's legitimate. You'll want to stop this before March 25th. The date burned again. I left with an official copy of the ownership certificate, $6.50 paid in fees, the stamped paper warm from the printer. Proof stacked on proof. That evening, I called my grandmother's old lawyer, the one who had handled her will. His voice was gravelly, matter of fact. I read him the details. Simple, he said. Send the realtor a cease and desist with the deed attached. And if your parents push harder, we can file for an injunction. Just remember, keep every scrap of evidence. Dates, signatures, notes. They'll matter. I scribbled in my notebook. Deed verified. $229,000 listing false. March 25th deadline. Lawyer on standby. Back at the house, I placed the stamp certificate beside the flyer. The contrast was almost laughable. There lies in toner, my name in ink pressed into the county seal. The stakes were undeniable now. If I didn't act, they would drag my house into chaos. If I did, they would face a wall they hadn't expected. I looked around the living room, still smelling faintly of lemon polish from my grandmother's habits. The clock ticked steadily. Decision settled in me. This wasn't just survival. It was defense of legacy. By March 16, 2021, I had gathered every page. The deed, the certified ownership certificate, the realtor flyer with my parents' number scribbled on it. The documents sat in a neat stack on my desk, weighted by my grandmother's old brass letter opener. That morning I called the lawyer. I'm ready, I told him. Good, he said. We'll send a cease and desist first. If they ignore it, we escalate. I scanned everything at the library. The machine word glass warm under my palms as the green light slid across. 12 pages total, bundled into a PDF. I added a cover note. Unauthorized listing. Owner of record, Celira Mornay. Deed attached. Step 1. Emailed packet to Harper & Company. Realty. Step 2. Printed hard copies delivered to the county property office. Step 3. Couriered a letter directly to my parents' address. Formal, cold, signed by counsel. The lever wasn't anger this time. It was paperwork. 3 days later at 11:23 my phone rang. The realtor's voice was nervous. We've canceled the listing. We had no idea. Your parents misrepresented the ownership. I apologize. That evening I dropped by their house. The kitchen smelled of overcooked broccoli. The cease and desist letter lay open on the counter, the bold heading visible. Unauthorized action notice. My father's face was red. You embarrassed us. Dragging lawyers into family matters? I stayed calm. I defended what was mine. That's not embarrassment. That's ownership. My mother's voice cracked. You think a piece of paper makes you right? I met her eyes. Yes. In this case it does. Silence. Only the hum of the refrigerator filled the room. When I left, I heard my sister hiss. She ruined everything. But as the door closed behind me, I felt the quiet shock lingering in their house. They hadn't expected me to fight with documents. They hadn't expected me to win. The cease and desist didn't just stop the sale. It rewired the entire household dynamic. By March 20, 2021, the realtor had fully withdrawn. No listing, no showing, no March 25th deadline. My inbox held his short email. File closed. Apologies again. I printed it, slid it into my folder with the deed and certificate. One more piece of armor. The consequences came quickly. My sister cornered me in the driveway one evening, her voice sharp over the crunch of gravel. You cost me my future. Do you know what townhouse I could have had with that money? I kept my arms folded. It was never your money. Or your house. She spat. Selfish. Then stormed off, car tires spitting pebbles. At Sunday dinner, the table once full of chatter was brittle. My father barely spoke. My mother set plates down with a clatter. Finally she muttered. We only wanted fairness. Fairness, I said evenly, would have been respecting Grandma's will. Fairness would have been letting me live without fear of losing my roof. No one argued back. The clock above the stove ticked loudly. 1932. Practical fallout appeared too. My parents had to reimburse the realtor for preliminary marketing costs. $540. Small but enough to sour their mood. And because they'd used their own number on the flyer, curious neighbors began asking questions. Their pride cracked under whispers. Meanwhile, I felt lighter. With the listing gone, I cut back one cafe shift a week, finally taking Tuesday evenings for myself. I started painting again, canvases spread across my grandmother's old dining table. Small wins, but mine. My grandmother's lawyer called to check in. You stood your ground, he said simply. Most people cave under family pressure. You didn't. I hung up and stared out the window at the snow melting off the garden beds. Daffodil shoots were pushing through. The house felt steady again, walls warm around me. It wasn't the end of conflict, but for the first time the balance had shifted. They were on the defensive. I was standing firm. On March 28, 2021, a letter arrived from Harper & Company, Realty. The envelope was thin, businesslike, smelling faintly of printer ink. Inside was a full account log of who authorized the listing of 18 Willow Bend. Client contact: Mr. and Mrs. Mornay. Authorization date: March 5, 2021. Listing package delivered: March 7, 2021. There it was, in black and white. Not a misunderstanding. Not a slip. My parents had signed, claimed authority, and pushed the sale. I placed the letter on my dining table beside the deed. The contrast was undeniable. My name embossed on the county certificate, their signatures trying to overwrite it. That evening, I carried both sets of papers to their house. The smell of stew hit me as I stepped inside, heavy and salty. My sister sat at the table, scrolling on her phone. I laid the letter flat. This says you authorized the sale. My mother's hands froze over the ladle. My father's jaw tightened. We were acting for the family, he said finally. No, I replied. You were acting against me. My sister scoffed. You're overreacting. You have the house. What's the problem? I looked directly at her. The problem is, you tried to steal it. My father's voice rose. Watch your words. I didn't flinch. They're accurate. And they're on paper. Silence. Only the bubbling stew filled the room. My parents' countermove was weak. My mother muttered, if you just shared, none of this would have been necessary. I slid the deed and the realtor's log back into my folder. Necessary or not, it's finished. You won't try again. For the first time, I saw a flicker of doubt in my father's eyes. He knew. They all knew. The truth gap had closed. There was no more pretending, no more gray. I left their house calm, the night air cold but clean on my skin. Behind me, their voices rose in argument, not with me but with each other. And I knew the fight was over. On March 28, 2021, a letter arrived from Harper & Company, Realty. The envelope was thin, businesslike, smelling faintly of printer ink. Inside was a full account log of who authorized the listing of 18 Willow Bend. Client contact: Mr. and Mrs. Mornay. Authorization date: March 5, 2021. Listing package delivered: March 7, 2021. There it was, in black and white. Not a misunderstanding. Not a slip. My parents had signed, claimed authority, and pushed the sale. I placed the letter on my dining table beside the deed. The contrast was undeniable. My name embossed on the county certificate, their signatures trying to overwrite it. That evening, I carried both sets of papers to their house. The smell of stew hit me as I stepped inside, heavy and salty. My sister sat at the table, scrolling on her phone. I laid the letter flat. This says you authorized the sale. My mother's hands froze over the ladle. My father's jaw tightened. We were acting for the family, he said finally. No, I replied. You were acting against me. My sister scoffed. You're overreacting. You have the house. What's the problem? I looked directly at her. The problem is, you tried to steal it. My father's voice rose. Watch your words. I didn't flinch. They're accurate. And they're on paper. Silence. Only the bubbling stew filled the room. My parents' countermove was weak. My mother muttered, if you just shared, none of this would have been necessary. I slid the deed and the realtor's log back into my folder. Necessary or not, it's finished. You won't try again. For the first time, I saw a flicker of doubt in my father's eyes. He knew. They all knew. The truth gap had closed. There was no more pretending, no more gray. I left their house calm, the night air cold but clean on my skin. Behind me, their voices rose in argument, not with me but with each other. And I knew the fight was over. It's September 2021 now, half a year since the last confrontation, and life inside 18 Willow Bend has a quiet rhythm again. The mornings start with the creak of the old floorboards and the smell of coffee drifting from the chipped blue kettle my grandmother left behind. I sit at the dining table, scarred with her knife marks, wax stains still visible, writing out bills. Property tax, $535 due this quarter. Utilities, $87. Groceries, $142 this month. All mine to handle, and I handle them. The folder of documents, the deed, the certified copy, the realtor's log, sits in the top drawer of my desk, labeled in black marker, house records. I check it once a month, not out of fear but as reminder. I keep boundaries now. I see my parents only at neutral places, cafes, once every few weeks. When conversations turn toward property or money, I say calmly, that subject isn't open. The first time my father tried to push, I stood, gathered my bag and left. He hasn't tested me since. My sister doesn't visit. She posts pictures of apartments downtown. Leases signed with parental help. That's their choice. I don't comment, I don't compare. I water my grandmother's roses in the front yard. Crimson buds rising against the brick walls, and I think, this is mine. I have plans now. In 3 months, I'll repaint the guest room, turning it into a small studio space. By spring, I'll refinish the porch. Step by step, steady work. Not to raise the house's value for someone else, but to make it more mine. This house isn't just shelter. It's the line I drew. It's the proof that silence can be broken, that paper can defend you when words fail. Tonight, I sit at the window with a blanket over my knees. Outside, the street lamps glow against the trees, the air cool with the first edge of autumn. I sip my coffee slowly, letting the heat settle in my chest. I don't rehearse their threats anymore. I don't wait for fairness. I live here, steady, present. And I choose myself every single day.